Welcome to another exciting interview today and Kung Fu Conversations. Today we are honored to have out of New York City, Sifu Paul Koh with us. Sifu, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's a real honor and privilege to be on your show. I know we've been talking about this for quite some time, and the time difference didn't allow us to make it happen, but here we are.
Fantastic. Sifu, we'll start in the same place we do with a lot of our folks. I've known you for almost 20-something years following your journey. When I first started my journey in 1998, I saw Bola on the infantile days of the internet, and I'm like, that looks awesome. And so if you would tell us your journey into Jow Pai and Sifu Takwa Ing, please share.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you get some popcorn because this is a long story.
We've got time.
We've got time for you.
We're going to go back in a time machine back to 1979. And here I am, a young man, young teen, about 13, almost 14, living in Long Island and coming from a background of immigrant parents and, speaking a different language at home and not really being able to meld into like American society that well, because I was like straddling both sides, not really interested in baseball or football and all the other stuff that the guys were doing, and really being captured by this romantic idea of the Ying Hong, the hero, the Chinese hero, reading all the stories about, Guan Gong, General Quan, and the Three Kingdoms, and Wang Fei Hong, and Feng Sayok, and Hong He-gun, and all these people. And I said, you know what? I'm really into like knights and chivalry and Robin Hood and all this stuff, dreaming like a fantasy for a young man. And I said, none of that is available anymore. I mean, knights in shining armor, long time gone. But I could be a kung fu hero. And that just captured my imagination. And by luck, I had this dear friend of mine, Hamilton, who lived in the town, and his dad was the owner of the local Chinese takeout. So, and I worked for them as a waiter / busboy. And I said to, Hamilton, I said, look, can I like tag along with your dad one day and you and me go to Chinatown in New York City? And he's like, sure, but why? And like, I want to find a Sifu. I want to find a master. He's like, you really want to find a Sifu? You really know what you're doing? And I'm like, yeah. And here I have this list of 50 schools. Right? I'd done my research. I'd looked in the yellow pages. I looked in Kung Fu magazines and Black Belt, Inside Kung Fu and everything, because there was no internet, nothing, right? So I dug up all these names and had a list of all these schools. And we went into Chinatown one Sunday morning and we hit them. The old man went to go, shopping for the restaurant. We hit them one by one. I can't tell you everybody's name.
It's fine.
Keep them. Fine. People safe. But one by one, we're going to these different schools in Chinatown, knocking on the doors, and they'd open the door. And some of them were incredibly clandestine. And I'd say, what do you want, kid? And I'm like, I want to learn Kung Fu. And they're like, we don't do that here. This is a ping pong parlor. Meanwhile, you see the altar in the background. You see all the weapons and the lion heads and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, man, they just snubbed me. So, okay, fine. On to the next one. Next one, another very well-known Sifu, passed away a while ago. And so I can make you into a master in 3 years. And I'm just looking at him like, what? My friend is nudging me. I'm like, let's get out of here. So going down the list. And my friend says, you know what? I got to go help my dad. You have one name on the list, the last name on the list. You go by yourself and then meet me, in the parking lot and whatever later. I'm like, okay, fine. So who's the last one on the list? Jow Pai. Tiger Claw.
Huh.
I was a kid.
Wow.
I was not stupid. I saved the best for last. And I still have the exact same handbill that Fujao used to put out at that time. And it's a picture of Grandmaster Wai Hong cutting a brick in half with one, unsupported brick with one shot. And I go to 145 Canal Street. It was a beautiful, sunny day. And I ring the doorbell. And who answers the door but the old man? And he's at the top of the stairs, classic Grandmaster Wai Hong there with a cigarette. And he says, "What do you want?" And I said, "Sifu, I want to learn Kung Fu." He said, "Come on up." So I went up the rickety staircases that we had in Chinatown at that time, come into his room, his parlor area, and I basically spilled my guts. And he's like, "Tell me who you are. Tell me where you're from." I tell him, I write my name in Chinese as bad as I did. I tried my best. He corrected a couple of strokes, told him all the stories and everything that I knew and everything that I had studied up about, Fujao at that time. And he's like, "Okay, well, that's great. But, I'm retired." And my heart sank, he's like, but my student can teach you, So he gave me the number of Tak Wah Eng, and he was busy. So I met another student of Grandmaster Wai Hong, also referred by him, Master Tony Lau. And so I called Master Tony Lau and I said, "Look, I visited Grandmaster and he said to call you and, you could teach me Kung Fu." He's like, "Well, you know what? Okay, that's great, but I'm busy right now. Call me next year." And I said, "Next year?"
Ugh.
And then I did a fast calculation in my mind. I said, "Sifu's testing me. You're testing me, aren't you?" I don't know if he was really testing me or just brushing me off. So I went back home. I said, "Okay, I got these two guys that I want to learn from. And in the meantime, fooling around with some Taekwondo, whatever, fooling around with some Wing Chun, whatever." And then a year to the day, I call him and he says, "You're the little kid that called me?" I'm like, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, what have you been doing?" "I've been doing this, that, and the other." He says, "I got to come out and see you." So he actually came out to Long Island to see me. We had a big meeting and he's like, "If you really want to learn Kung Fu, you know what? Find a room and find 10 friends and establish a class and I'll come out." And I was in high heaven. And the very next day was like a Monday. I went to all my friends. I'm like, you, guess what you're doing? You're doing Kung Fu, get $35 a month. We're going to have classes Tuesdays and Thursdays. I didn't even have a place yet. And they were like, "Okay." So then the next day I ran to the local Boys and Girls Club and made a deal with the director there to rent their rec room 2 nights a week. So we rented that 2 nights a week. And that's how I started a club in Long Island, which I want to say it was probably one of the first Kung Fu schools in Long Island because there was no commercial Chinese martial arts school. It was all Taekwondo, primarily Aikido, and even Taekwondo hadn't taken off yet. There were no soccer moms, nothing like that. It was pretty raw. It was pretty raw. So we spent about a good 10 years with Sifu Tony training Hung Gar and Jow Pai. And then I came back into the city, in and out in Chinatown, in and out, and of course met his training brother, Master Tak Wah Eng. And he and I had a connection that I felt so inextricably at that time that I said to myself, "This is your Sifu, your real teacher." And, I would go and get pointers. And since they were classmates, it, really wasn't, a big of an issue. So I started to train, with him. and delved, head first into so many different aspects of Kung Fu. Fujao, Hung Gar, he introduced me to Seven Star Mantis, to Tai Chi, to Shaolin, to all these different things, all sorts of weaponry. And, I came to, fast forward to a decision in my late 20s, early 30s that I really wanted to do this for the rest of my life, which I had already said to myself quietly when I was 13. But being a 13-year-old, nobody took you seriously, right? Especially with immigrant parents, like you got to be a businessman, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, whatever.
Yep.
And I said, Mom, Dad, I hate Wall Street. I'm leaving and I'm going to do Kung Fu. And I took whatever savings I had and I moved into the city and I opened up a school on 56th and 8th Street, a little bit more uptown. And it's been this crazy joyride ever since. And I've never looked back. And there's been so many ups and so many downs and so many hard times and so many good times. But I wouldn't trade it in for the world. And that's the origin story, so to speak, how it happened.
What year was that, Sifu?
We started in 1979.
The school opening that you did.
School opening, I want to say it's 90. Okay, so it was the 35th anniversary of Jow Pai being open to the public in New York. I wrote an article about that for a Kung Fu magazine. I forget what they called it. They're defunct now. And I helped my Sifu construct a 35th anniversary memorial book for that, for Grandmaster. So I want to say that was 1991, and that was the very first time the Shaolin monks ever came to America and did a first show. They did one in Seattle, and they did one here with us. And it was in conjunction with our 35th anniversary. And Shi Guolin was there, Shi Yangming was there, all young men. We were all young men at that time. So I want to say 92. 92, I opened up the school right after the Shaolin show for Fujiao's 35th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
but
amazing.
I had been teaching since 88, like officially teaching since 88, but not having, a proper school, which is a difficult thing. You gotta, you're either going to college or you got a day job and you're doing Kung Fu at night. And if you boys have been around long enough, so if you roll back time, especially for Kung Fu, there was no really commercial presence for a Kung Fu martial arts school. So it's pretty hard. You're either doing it in your friend's basement, garage, or, out of a dance studio or something like that. And only into the 90s did you actually see like real legitimate schools coming out. So Jow Pai and Grandmaster Wai Hong and my Sifu Tak Wai Eng are, like an anomaly in that sorts, because they were the established school in New York Chinatown. It wasn't part of an association, a benevolent society, or some kind of a family group. It was a standalone martial arts school.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which you didn't have at that time. So
no,
they opened up to the public in the late 60s. So and Grandmaster was really cool, and he would teach many non-Chinese, and that's actually the flack that I caught even in 79. I remember going to a particular school and they're like, you're not Chinese, so you're not going to learn Kung Fu.
Right.
And I don't blame them. That was just, you got to look at where the masters are coming from at that time. They faced a lot of discrimination from the greater society. And they were like, look, if this is my nuclear bomb, I'm not going to teach you.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great way to put it too.
You got to think about it but all the Chinese masters that I've met and learned from were always very nice to me. And I think it's because I admire their culture, the old school Chinese culture, and tried my best to adopt it. So I learned how to write and read in Chinese. I learned how to speak Cantonese, which I feel is part and parcel with learning Kung Fu. There's some kind of cultural aspect to the art of Kung Fu that if you don't delve into that part of it, you're going to miss something. Mm. The names, the terms that they use to express the movements and the techniques and the frame of mind is not a Western frame of mind. So if you try to use a Western concept to learn Kung Fu, you're not going to come away with the full pot. You're going to be missing something in the translation. And as you guys are, Kung Fu practitioners, you can know the poetic phrases that they use to express a particular movement doesn't really translate literally into English. It doesn't sound right. Yeah. So you got to know the culture. You got to know how they think. And we're not talking about China today. We're talking about China several hundred years or more ago with that wealth of ancient knowledge passed down. So coming back, full circle to that, they're not really happy with dealing with Westerners because of a mistrust. So you have to hang around long enough until you gain your Sifu's trust. And I still kind of teach like that. I'm pretty old school in that sense, very non-commercial. Mm-hmm. In my way. I think I was brought up in one of the last generations that was really old school, and it's kind of hard to shake that sometimes. There's good and bad aspects of that, so I'm not quite sure how you guys perceive things and how you teach, but I have one student that calls me what does he call me? Biblical Sifu.
That's a great handle. That's a great handle.
God stuff, because we grew up in New York City's Chinatown, where you had to know not only how to perform, but you had to know how to fight. Mm. And that's something that we as Kung Fu practitioners in New York Chinatown, and particularly Jow Pai, we are known for that component. We're not just, doing only the artistic aspect, but we were trained to apply it. So growing up in that really hardcore atmosphere, it leaves a mark on you, and you pass it along, and it's good in some respects. It keeps you honest and it keeps you tough.
Mm-hmm. Sifu, just in case some of the audience isn't familiar with it, could you share a little bit of the history of Jow Pai with us and some of the characteristics that make it its own unique method, style, and system?
Right. Well, Jow Pai, the literal translation is, you can literally translate it as Tiger Claw Sect or Tiger Claw System. We usually say Tiger Claw System. It's a very rare art that was passed down to a few individuals, to my understanding, one or two per generation, up until Grandmaster Wai Hung made it more accessible to the general public. Fu Jiao started several centuries ago, basically to overthrow the Qing dynasty and restore the Ming. So I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase.
Absolutely.
So all these Southern Shaolin systems claim to have that as their root. And I think they're all related in some sense to the Southern Shaolin techniques and their movement. But Fu Jiao, the original name is actually Hak Fu Mun, Black Tiger System. So a lot, it can go by Hak Fu Mun, Fu Jow Pai, Hak Fu Jiao, and so on. So the origin story that we know of, because these individuals are Ming loyalists and rebels against the Manchurian Empire, there's nothing really written down. You guys are rebels. You're not going to say, this is Randel and this is Owen and we live here and this is my address and this is my email.
Right.
So you don't even know if the names that they used were really their real names or not. So there's some bit of history lost in time. But if we come to the late 1800s, we find ourselves in Hoi Dongji, which is the Hoi Hong Temple in Canton Province, just by the mouth of the Pearl River, which I have gone and visited and practiced there many, many times. And it's a very powerful location. I want to say Hoi Hong Temple is, as Sifu would say, something close to like St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. And all the martial artists would practice in the huge courtyard that they have. So the last time I went to Hoi Hong Temple, they were restoring it back to its former glory. But the first time I went back, let me see, what year was that? Was it 2000? Was it 99 or no, it's probably like 2000, 2001. When I went back, it was just 3 or 4 buildings left. Most of the temple was burned down in 1928 during another uprising, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of artifacts were lost, but the main courtyard was still there. I was able to burn incense there and give thanks to my martial ancestors and practice and take lots of video and photos. But that is I want to say the point that Fu Jiao comes into the modern sense. There's a monk there. We don't know his name, or rather his name has not been divulged. So we'll just call him, Hafu Wo Song, like a Black Tiger monk, right? And you have Master Wong Bil Hong and another master that didn't see eye to eye and decided they wanted to do a challenge match. And the challenge match at that time was to the death. So they said, okay, well, let's go to Hoi Hong Temple where all the other martial artists train. Like, in fact, TQ Sam, Iron Bridge 3 from the Hung Gar system, lived there with the abbot for a few years trying to get off of opium and eventually passed away there. So it's a very famous for its martial art connections. So these two gentlemen wanted to fight. And they met there like dawn and were fighting in front of the courtyard, right in front of Dai Hong Bodin, the Hall of the Great Hero. And they're going at it, and supposedly one has one by the throat, the other one has another one by the groin. And the old monk master comes and boom, separates them, and they go flying. And they recognize immediately that this monk master is a master of Kung Fu and is so far superior to them. They both immediately kneel down and say, Master, will you teach us? And he's like, no, I'm not going to teach you. You guys came here to kill each other. You're out of your mind. And they, persisted and prostrated themselves. And he said, okay, I'll teach you only if you promise me that you're going to reconcile your differences and never engage in anything like this again. And as we know it, the two spent some time learning, but the other individual learned a little bit and then left. Whatever happened to him, I don't know. There's no record of it. But Wong Bil Hong stayed with the monk until his passing. and learned all of the Black Tiger system. And then when the monk passed away and he buried him, he renamed the system into Hoi Dongji Hakfumun Fu Jow Pai, which basically translates as Hoi Hung Temple Black Tiger System Tiger Claw Kung Fu, in honor of the monk and his residence within the temple. Prior to the temple, we don't know where the art came from. And it's very unusual. And as I said before, they probably kept it secret. And I'm sure he was one of the monks running away from the burning of Shaolin. So I can't verify how old he was. I can't verify his name, but that's the tradition that was passed down to us. So Wang Bilhong becomes the first generation inheritor of the Tiger Claw system. His nephew, Wang Muntoi, who's my great grandmaster, wants to learn from the paternal uncle. And the paternal uncle says, okay, I'll teach you, but we have to go into seclusion. Let's go to Lo Fao San. Lo Fao San is a very famous mountain in Canton, a ways away out of Guangzhou, out of the main city. And it's known for its herbs. A lot of herbalists and doctors will go there and gather herbs. And there's many Taoist temples up there, but very few people living up there. So he spent 7 years with his uncle learning the Tiger Claw system. And he had already trained in other, Kung Fu, so he was very adept. But, his teacher, Wang Bilhong, said, look, you're going to start over again. My standard for Fujiao is so high that you're starting all over again and just doing basic techniques. No form, no nothing. And particularly Lin Gong, like the basic training. Fingertip push-ups, playing with the iron bag, the iron balls, twisting the stick, all this stuff to physically and mentally prepare you to learn the techniques of a Tiger Claw. And then learning one move and spend an inordinate amount of time until you master that one move, that one solitary move before you go into the next move and the next move and the next move, to guarantee that it would be of the highest standard and quality possible. So when you think about this, you go, whoa, this is, really, really old style training, quite the opposite of what, we do today. So you can imagine the old man's, claw hand is incredibly sharp. And I have pictures of him and I'm like, you see it. You see his hand looks like a claw. It doesn't look like a hand. And you said, wow, what a forging process that must have been. And then in the end, of course, learning the forms. The Tiger Claw system is incredibly powerful. And I want to say simple, clean, direct, and effective in its approach. One of the main characteristics that differentiates it is that it is truly a combination of external and internal. Many people look at it and think, well, it's external. It's just another tiger system. It's just Hung Gar, whatever. And it's not. It's very internal in its aspect and quite dynamic in its approach. So the approach for the training is not only that physical aspect, but the mental and spiritual aspect, and using the chi and that dynamic force of breathing in and out as applying the Tiger Claw and the dynamic tension. So it was funny. A few months ago, I don't know if you know him, Sifu Kevin Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, fan of.
Yeah. Incredible Wing Chun practitioner, incredible Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And I want to say Sifu Kevin is so kind and really embodies the characteristics of Modak, that martial virtue. We had a blast. He had come here to do a little video on YouTube. and we talked about Fujiao, and, it was summertime, whatever. And he's like, oh my God, look at your forearms. Your forearms are crazy. They're so, ripped and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's from doing that basic tiger claw training for decades. No weightlifting, no nothing. It's just from that, and then he's like, wow, your fingers are so strong. I said, well, that's the whole premise. Think about it. The name is Fujiao. It's tiger claw. It's not tiger palm. It's not tiger.
Yeah.
It's tiger claw. This is the weapon. And everything is focused to make that weapon as sharp and as powerful and resilient as possible through these dynamic exercises, breathing, stretching, and all the movement is based on the tiger, not only in a physical sense. You have the silhouette of the tiger, but you have the mentality and the spirit. And Grandmaster always like to say, it's a fighting tiger, okay? It's not a sleeping tiger. It's not a tiger, taking a break, going for a smoke. It's a fighting tiger. You flip the switch on this guy, and what's the fighting tiger going to do? The fighting tiger is going to kill you. Even if it sacrifices itself, it's going to get that job done. And you hear that's being told to you, but it doesn't really resonate with you until you truly delve into that art form 100% heart and soul. Because people, they like Bakwa, Xingyi, Wing Chun, and so on. They read a lot of stuff. They see a lot of stuff. But, unless you really taste it on a daily basis, you don't have that ability to appreciate it nor judge it. So I think a lot of people don't spend enough time to learn Fujiao. So let me just tell you this too. So as a precursor, before you're even allowed to touch anything that is, black tiger, tiger claw, you have to learn the Hung system. So our prerequisite was to master tiger crane form, Fu Hok Sun Yin. That was a prerequisite as a baseline, because, as I was saying before, most of those Southern systems that claim to come from Southern Shaolin have the same or similar framework, stances, punches, kick, body mechanics, and so on. And then they diverge. It's like brothers in a family. You have the same mother and father, but you're not the same. You're different. You're not your brother. You're not your cousin. You have similarities. You share certain ideas, but you're really your own man. So these are how these systems came out. And became their own after generations. So I can only imagine the founder or men that made up Fujiao were really excellent technicians at the finger technique and clawing technique, that was their specialty above everything else. And so when you practice Fujiao, you transform and you are no longer yourself. You become a tiger.
That's amazing.
Purposes. That's what you become. In spirit, in body, in physicality. And, I've been training, with Sifu because, I still train with him. 45 years later, we're still training like 3-4 days a week. And I just spoke to him this morning, and he's like, you weren't there. When you were doing that, you weren't there. It wasn't you anymore. It was something else. It was somebody else. And you tap into something. And then when you express this to a would-be student, they just go, what? What are you talking about? But you have to understand, and as we had said earlier before we started the podcast, this is a transformational process. It's a art for life. It teaches you how to go beyond yourself. It's a form of meditation. You transform and you become that thing. So, Owen, you can maybe tell me, when you play the Bakwa, you become the Bakwa. You're not just, walking around in a circle. You dissolve.
Yeah.
and you reconform. You become something else. And I'm sure the same with all martial arts. It has to be, because that's the only way it takes you to another level of enlightenment and who you are. So you look at this. You have this amazing fighting aspect, this, nitty gritty blood and guts on this side of the spectrum, and the other side of the spectrum, you transcend and you become enlightened like a Buddha. It's amazing. So on one side, you're like this wild, man-eating tiger, and on the other side, you become a Buddha. And then this is what I saw, and I'm sorry if I'm going in circles.
No, keep going.
When I met Master Tak Wah Eng. I saw him as a young man. He was like 35 years old when I met him. Now he's 75, right? Yeah. And I was like, this guy is so sweet. He was so nice to us, because all the other Sifu were mean. They were mean. They would curse you out. They would smack you. They would hit you. But he was so sweet and so kind to us. We loved to stay with him. And then when he trained, he completely transformed. So we're sitting in the school, right? So he comes to visit all the time, and we're training, and he's sitting there. And I have a couple of students, hanging out. They're doing their work for me, whatever. And then, he's sitting there. It's like, oh, this is a nice little old man sitting in Sifu's chair. Then he gets up and busts out a move, and everybody's eyes fall out of their head, and they go, where the hell did that come from? This guy all of a sudden became, huge, and became a tiger, and his whole energy filled up the room. That for me caught my attention and my heart when I was a kid, and it still does to this day. And that's Fu Jiao for me when he comes out. So he's able to have this compassionate heart like a Buddha, but come out like this ferocious tiger. And there's the yin and yang. And that's what keeps me going on a daily basis, and keep wanting to practice and become a better person, a better martial artist, a better Sifu, just a better version of me every single day. And that's what I strive for, and then when I practice, it's like, see, you're not there. You became something else. You're tapping into something else. And I think that's great, because you're when you practice Kung Fu, I had written a blog about this a while back. When you practice Kung Fu, you need to be a whole bunch of different things. You need to be a killer. I'm sorry. You need to be a killer. You need to be a monk. You need to be a master mathematician. You need to be an alchemist. You need to be a shaman. You need to be a ballerina. You need to be all these. You need to be an engineer. You need to be all these things rolled up into one. And that's what I feel the Kung Fu man is, if I can use that term. The Kung Fu man is a Renaissance man. You got to know music. You got to know art. You got to know medicine. You got to know martial arts. You have to know everything, at least a smattering of all that stuff to become something in total. You can't just be a bruiser, And when I was a kid, like Master Tony Lau was like, look, if you want a black sash or a black belt, you have to go to tournament. Okay. So we would go to tournament, and this was in the, 70s and 80s, and there was no Kung Fu division. So, you do your form against the karate guys, and you have to fight them. And you have to go and fight at least, I don't know, whatever his rule was, 5 or 10 different tournaments. Win or lose is not the point. Go fight. You got to go and fight. You got to go do your form, and then that will be one of your qualifications to get your black sash, black belt. And I thought that was tough. It was so cool. There was a lot of discrimination, because you're going into the karate world, and they're like, oh, ooh, black pajamas, blah blah blah. Just that kind of thing. Well, you got white pajamas, so who are you making fun of? But and just to digress slightly, Master Lau was one of Peter Urban's top black belt students in Goju Karate in his Chinatown dojo in the early 60s. So I love it. I got things coming at me, left, right, up, down, upside. I've seen everything from soup to nuts, from the heyday of hardcore. Like, we didn't have no sparring gear. Jun Rhee had not made his, his sparring equipment yet. We had little like football pads and a groin cup and a mouthpiece, and you had to go and slam hard. To the ninja craze, then it was the wushu craze. Now it's the jiu-jitsu craze. I've seen everything, come and go, and we're still here. We're still here. So I just want to say I'm proud of you guys for being into Kung Fu the way I was into Kung Fu in your beginning and now, and you're helping in your own special way to promote and preserve our art that is so beloved and we treasure so much that nobody understands. Nobody understands you, not your wife, not your family, not your best friend. They think you're crazy.
That's so true.
But it's true. But you know what? It's the best kind of crazy that you could be.
We were talking, Owen and I, we talk a lot about the show, and one of the things that we wanted to do was, like I said, I had followed you either in Kung Fu magazines or on the internet in its infantile days. And one of the good things about this digital media platform that I think can happen is I love books. I'm a reader. I have a literature degree.
Wonderful. Wow.
But sometimes when we have the conversation with somebody in person, you can hear the passion. You can feel the energy, and you hear them say these stories in their own words, in their own inflections. And I think that is something so important that this media can present for us.
I agree. Could you imagine now, Randel, could you imagine if you could go back, 200 years?
All the time.
Hear the founding fathers talk to you about why they came together and how much they hated each other, but they worked on this project to make the country that we live in, and hear it in their own voices and their own.
That's right.
Could you imagine going further back in time and say, well, I want to meet Fok Yung Gap. I want to meet Wong Fei Hung, and I want to hear them talk and teach me and tell me in their own voice what it's supposed to be like. And see, so you're doing that now. And this is what I feel I've tried to do with the books and Kung Fu in a Minute and the publications, is because when I was coming up, there was a very famous Sifu, and I'm sure you know him, Wong Duk Phai, or sometimes they say Duk Phai Wong, right?
Duk Phai Wong.
Yeah, and famous Chole Fat Sifu was a really good friend of mine. Talked to him on WeChat all the time. And he had articles in Inside Kung Fu, written by Jane Hallander, his writer student. She passed away a while back. And when you read it, you were like, ooh, I want to do that. I want to learn this. And I want to do the same thing for the next generation and imbue my passion into whatever I do in whatever medium I touch. So one day I might reach guys like you who really want to learn Kung Fu and don't have access. Like I didn't have access. I had to search it out. But, right? So you had to, like, in Boulder, Colorado, who was teaching Kung Fu 25 years ago? Nobody.
Yeah.
And it's like, and if you find somebody, you don't know if it's authentic. You don't know if they're screwing around with you, and you're this passionate young man. You really, really want to delve into it. So I want to provide that for anybody, anywhere, internationally, because I know I can't be where I want to be. So I just had a guy contact me. Where was he? In Belgium? In Belgium. He wrote me an email, said, Sifu, tell me the airport that I can fly in to meet you and teach you, train with you. Oh, that was the Czech Republic, from Czech Republic. I'm flying in from Czech Republic. So I'm waiting for this guy to show up on my doorstep, and we want to be able to provide that for kids like us, because we were kids, right?
Yeah,
kids,
very much so. Yep.
I'm 15 years old. I want to be a Kung Fu hero, and I have to go dig it out for myself and fight for it. And here we are. And if I can provide something an easier journey for somebody else, I would love to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. I
love it. I do too. I think you might like this. So what you're doing, Mai Sifu in Wing Chun, he has a saying that we can always work on shaving down the barrier to entry for a student on how they enter the system, but the road to mastery can never be shortened.
No,
that will be their personal journey. There will be ups and downs. And I thought you'd like that. But what you're saying is you're working